They say betrayal feels like fire searing through your chest, leaving nothing but ashes where love once lived. I never believed that until the day my husband, the man I built a life with, flaunted his new bride under the Dubai sun, as if our marriage had been nothing but a rehearsal for his grand performance. But what he never expected, what none of them expected, was the one phone call that turned his paradise into ruin. Before I take you deep into this story of love, betrayal, and karma, I want to remind you, if stories of justice and raw emotions strike your heart, then subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and share this video so more people can witness how arrogance always finds its downfall. I was not a naive woman. By the time my marriage crumbled, I had seen enough of the world to know that promises can be broken as easily as glass. Still, nothing prepared me for the sting of betrayal that came not from a stranger, but from the man who once whispered forever to me. Michael and I had been married for 15 years. Our lives were woven together like threads in a tapestry home: business, dreams, laughter, even grief. We had weathered storms that should have made us unbreakable, or so I thought. In truth, I had been blind to the cracks in our foundation, cracks that widened until they split us apart. When the divorce was finalized, I told myself I would heal. I told myself I would reclaim the woman I had been before him. But then I saw him again in social media, on glossy photos taken at a luxury resort in Dubai. He was there with her, the young bride, a girl barely older than my daughter would have been, had fate given us one. She clung to his arm like a prized possession, her smile wide, her eyes hungry. And he looked smug, as if parading her across golden beaches was his victory lap, as if my heartache was his trophy. I could have ignored it. I could have stayed silent, licking my wounds in private. But when those pictures began circulating among our old friends, when whispers turned to laughter, I felt my dignity burn. I knew I would not stay silent. The invitation came weeks later. They were hosting a celebration at the Dubai resort, a kind of second honeymoon disguised as a party. Friends, business associates, family, everyone was welcome to witness their so-called happiness. It was as if he wanted to etch his betrayal into stone, to show the world how easily he had replaced me. My phone buzzed with messages from sympathetic friends. Some urged me not to look, not to give him the satisfaction. Others whispered their outrage, saying I deserved better. But one message stood out. It was from his mother, a woman who had once been my ally, who had once called me daughter. She asked if I had heard about the party. Her words were simple, but beneath them, I felt a storm brewing. I remembered her graceful, sharp, a woman who valued loyalty above all. She had never trusted Michael's appetite for excess. During our marriage, she often warned me, saying, "He wants too much, and too much will never be enough." I wondered what she thought of this new wife, this display of arrogance under the desert sun. The night before the party, I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the glowing screen. Pictures of Michael and his young bride danced before me, champagne glasses raised, bodies close. My hand trembled as I scrolled, but not from weakness. No, it was something else. A quiet, simmering strength, like embers waiting for air. And then, at the break of dawn, the call came. Not to me, but to them. I did not know the words exchanged, not in that moment. But I knew his mother well enough to imagine the blade she wielded with her voice. That call would unravel everything. But before that unraveling, before his smug smile was erased, I need you to understand how I reached that point. I need you to see the road that led me from a trusting wife to a woman ready to watch him fall. Our marriage had not ended in a single explosion. It had decayed slowly, like fruit left in the sun. He became restless. He worked longer hours, traveled more often, and when he was home, his eyes were distant. I tried to reach him, but every conversation turned into a fight. He accused me of nagging, of holding him back, of failing to understand his ambitions. I accused him of lying, of neglect, of abandoning the vows we had once cherished. By the time I discovered the affair, I was not surprised. It was not just another woman, it was youth, vitality, the thrill of conquest. She was a secretary at his firm, wide-eyed and eager to please. I confronted him, and for the first time, I saw no remorse in his eyes, only defiance, as if he had been waiting for the chance to shed me like old skin. The divorce was swift. He fought hard for assets, clawing at everything we had built together. I let him take more than he deserved, not because I was weak, but because I was tired. I wanted freedom more than furniture, peace more than bank accounts. But freedom came at a cost: loneliness, silence, a hollow echo in the home we once shared. Nights stretched long and empty, and in those hours, I wondered if I had lost not just a husband but also a part of myself. And then came Dubai. Imagine standing in the ruins of your life, only to watch the man who burned it parade through your ashes with a crown on his head. That was what those photographs felt like. Every click of the camera was a dagger. Every smile on their lips was a spit on my wounds. But karma is patient. It waits, and sometimes it waits in the voice of a mother who refuses to watch her son drown in arrogance. I did not know what she said to him that morning. All I knew was that hours later, as guests gathered at the resort, whispers spread like wildfire. The celebration faltered, smiles faded, Michael's confidence cracked, and by nightfall, the world he thought he had built on sand began to sink. This is where my story truly begins. Asterisk. The morning sun rose high over Dubai, turning the sea into molten gold and the skyline into glass towers that shimmered like jewels. To anyone else, it might have looked like paradise, but for me, it was the backdrop of a performance staged to humiliate. My ex-husband Michael and his young bride thought they were writing a love story in the sand. What they did not know was that their stage was already crumbling, and the spotlight would soon burn instead of shine. I had not planned to attend their celebration. My wounds were too raw, and I wanted no part in their mockery of love. But when his mother called me days earlier, her voice laced with steel, I felt something shift. She did not ask me to come, yet her words stayed with me. He is flaunting a life he does not deserve. He needs to be reminded that arrogance has consequences. She did not elaborate, but I knew her well enough to recognize the storm in her tone. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed with message after message. Friends already at the resort sent me photos. Guests were arriving in glittering gowns and tailored suits, the air thick with money and vanity. The bride floated through the crowd like a jewel on display, her smile wide but rehearsed. Michael followed closely, his hand at her waist, his face a mask of pride. One picture stopped me cold. It was of Michael raising a glass of champagne, the ocean behind him. The words scrawled beneath by one of his friends, "To new beginnings." That phrase cut deeper than any insult. It was not just a toast. It was a declaration that I had been erased, rewritten as a mistake in his story. I could not sit idly by. Against my better judgment, I dressed a simple black dress, understated yet sharp, and pearls that had once belonged to his grandmother. They had been a gift to me during our wedding, a symbol of acceptance into the family. Wearing them now was not vanity, it was reclamation. A reminder that I had been more than a pelash, CEHOLDER. By the time I arrived, the party was in full swing. Music pulsed from hidden speakers, laughter bubbled in every corner, and the scent of expensive perfumes mixed with the salt of the sea. I stepped through the entrance and felt eyes turn. Whispers rippled like waves. Some gasped in surprise, others smirked with curiosity, but all of them knew who I was. The discarded wife. Michael saw me before I spoke a word. His smile froze mid-laugh, his hand tightening around his bride's waist. Her eyes darted to me, a flicker of recognition passing through them, followed quickly by a smirk of triumph. She leaned in, whispering something to him, and he straightened, trying to mask his discomfort with bravado. "Well," he said loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Look who decided to crash the party." Couldn't resist seeing what happiness looks like. Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. I felt heat rise in my chest, but I did not let it show. Instead, I walked closer, my heels steady on the marble floor, my face calm. "Happiness?" I asked softly, my voice cutting through the noise. "Is that what you call this performance?" His bride bristled, her hand gripping his arm tighter. "This is our celebration," she said with forced sweetness. "You were not invited." "No," I replied, meeting her eyes, but neither was respect. Gasps echoed around us. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, others leaned in, eager for the spectacle. Michael's jaw clenched, his mask of charm cracking. He leaned toward me, his voice low but sharp. "You should leave before you embarrass yourself." But before I could respond, a phone rang. Loud, clear. It was his. He pulled it from his pocket, frowning at the screen. When he saw the name flashing, his face drained of color. His mother drained of color. His mother. The crowd waited as he hesitated, torn between ignoring the call and answering it. Finally, with visible reluctance, he pressed the phone to his ear. Silence fell over the room as his expression shifted, first annoyance, then disbelief, then something close to fear. He turned away, stepping toward the balcony, but whispers followed him. I stayed where I was, watching, waiting. The bride looked confused, tugging at her gown, her confidence slipping. Guests exchanged glances, the tension crackling in the air. Every eye followed Michael as his shoulders stiffened, his hand tightening on the railing. When he finally turned back, his face was ashen. His mother's voice had cut deeper than any dagger. I knew that look. It was the same one he wore years ago when she discovered his first betrayal in business. When she told him that trust once broken could never be bought back. He walked back into the room, his steps slower now, his eyes unfocused. The bride rushed to him, touching his arm, whispering, but he brushed her off. For the first time that night, his arrogance faltered. I did not know what his mother had said, but I knew enough. It was the beginning of his unraveling. Still, the party pressed on. Guests, uncertain of what they had witnessed, clung to their drinks and conversations. The bride tried to salvage the moment, clinking her glass for attention. "Let us toast," she declared, her voice shaking slightly. "To love that conquers all." I almost laughed. Instead, I watched as Michael raised his glass mechanically, his eyes distant. He drank, but the fire in his gaze was gone. As the night wore on, the cracks widened. He snapped at the staff, ignored his guests, and left his bride standing alone more than once. Whispers grew louder. Something was wrong, and everyone could sense it. I moved through the crowd like a shadow, listening, observing. Friends who once admired him now murmured doubts. Business associates eyed him with suspicion. The young bride's smile faded, her charm wilting under the weight of his silence. And through it all, I stood tall, not as a scorned woman, not as a victim, but as a witness to the fall of a man who thought he could replace loyalty with spectacle. By the time midnight neared, the celebration had soured. Guests began to leave, their laughter gone, their curiosity replaced with unease. The bride clung to Michael, her eyes pleading, but he barely acknowledged her. His phone buzzed again, and again he turned away to answer. I did not need to hear the words to know the truth. His mother had struck. Whatever she revealed, whatever she threatened, it was enough to strip him of his pride in front of everyone he wanted to impress. As I left the resort, the cool night air wrapped around me like armor. For the first time in months, I felt whole, not because I had humiliated him, but because I had not needed to lift a hand. His downfall had come from within, from the very family he thought he could bend to his will. I walked away, my head high, the pearls at my neck glinting under the moonlight. Behind me, the sounds of discord grew louder, the celebration collapsing under its own weight. The Dubai skyline shimmered, but for Michael, the lights had gone dark. This was only the beginning. I wish I could tell you that I walked away from that Dubai resort with my dignity intact, but the truth is, my legs felt heavy, my throat was raw, and my heart had been shredded into pieces I was not sure would ever come back together. My ex-husband's laughter, echoing across the pool deck as he flaunted his young bride, replayed in my ears like a cruel melody I could not silence. But here's where things took a darker turn. As I left that glittering paradise of wealth and shallow smiles, something deep inside me began to stir. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It wasn't only betrayal or humiliation. It was something colder, sharper, more dangerous. It was resolve. Before I take you deeper into this part of my story, let me remind you, if you're listening right now, if you feel the sting of betrayal as I do, make sure you subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. Because what happened next is something you will not believe unless you walk with me through every detail. I returned to my hotel suite, far smaller and far less extravagant than the villa where my ex paraded his new bride. I closed the curtains against the blinding Dubai sun and collapsed on the bed. For hours, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every smirk, every mocking glance he had thrown my way. He wanted me broken. He wanted me erased. But that night, as the city lights glimmered outside, I received a call that shifted the ground beneath me. It was his mother. Yes, the very woman who had once whispered to me on our wedding day that she hoped I would make her son into a man worth respecting. Her voice trembled on the line, softer, older, but sharp enough to cut through my haze. "I saw the photos," she said without introduction. "He is making a fool of himself, and of all of us." For a moment, I could not breathe. She was watching too. The flaunting, the vanity, the public humiliation. It wasn't just aimed at me. It was staining his entire family name. "Do you want to stop him?" she asked suddenly. My heart pounded in my chest. "What are you saying?" She hesitated, then sighed. He believes he is untouchable. He thinks this young bride is the crown on his ego. But he has forgotten something. The will, he has not told her. He has not told anyone, and I have the power to change it all. Her words sent a jolt through my veins. The will, the inheritance, the empire his father had left behind when he passed. My ex-husband strutted around like a king, but in truth, much of his wealth, his connections, his standing, it was all borrowed, inherited, and conditional. If you want me to, she continued, I can make one call, just one call, and his perfect little world will crumble. I sat upright on the bed, my pulse racing. Was this real? Was I truly hearing the offer of vengeance handed to me on a silver platter? But part of me was afraid. Afraid of what it meant. Afraid of crossing a line from which there would be no return. I don't want pity, I said quietly, though my voice shook. I don't want to play games. This is not pity, she said firmly. This is justice. He humiliated you in front of the world. He betrayed the vows he made, not just to you, but to this family. If you won't protect yourself, I will protect the legacy. But I need to know you will not stand in the way. I closed my eyes. Images flashed before me, him leaning back in his chair at the poolside, drink in hand, his young bride's fingers tracing his arm, his smirk as he saw me watching. He thought he had won. He thought he had crushed me beyond repair. No, I whispered, I will not stand in the way. And with that, she ended the call. The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't know what she would do, or how fast, but I knew something had been set in motion. The next morning, Dubai woke up like it always did, sun beating down on glass towers, tourists spilling onto white sands, wealth flaunted at every corner. But at the resort, a storm was brewing. I walked through the lobby, holding my head high despite the ache in my chest. And that's when I saw it. My ex-husband standing at the front desk, his face red with fury, his voice raised as he argued with the manager. His bride hovered beside him, her perfect smile shattered, her hands wringing nervously. Something had gone wrong. I lingered at a distance, pretending to admire a decorative fountain, but my ears strained to catch his words. What do you mean the account is frozen? He barked. Do you know who I am? Do you understand who my father was? The manager's voice was calm, almost apologetic. I am very sorry, sir, but we have been instructed by your family's legal team. The funds are no longer available for use. There is nothing I can do. My ex slammed his fist against the counter. His bride gasped, tugging at his arm, whispering something urgent, but he was too blinded by rage to listen. And me, I nearly laughed out loud, because in that moment, I knew exactly what had happened. His mother had made the call. The will had been adjusted. His lifeline had been cut off. But the best part, he had no idea that I was standing only a few steps away, watching his empire crumble in real time. That night, as the news spread quietly among the guests, whispers followed him wherever he went. Some said the young bride had only married him for his wealth and was already reconsidering her choices. Others speculated about family feuds, legal troubles, disgrace. And me, I stayed silent. I let the world draw its own conclusions, because sometimes silence is louder than any scream of revenge. Still, deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. He was not a man who would surrender Isa, and his pride, his ego, they would drive him to make reckless choices. Desperate to claw back what he thought was his dot, the suspense of what came next kept me awake long into the night, because though I had been handed the first taste of justice, I also knew a war was about to ignite. And in that war, I would no longer be the victim. I would be the one writing the ending. Asterisk. Do you know what happens to a man who has built his entire life on illusion when the curtain suddenly falls? He doesn't crumble gracefully. He claws, he fights, he burns everything in his path in a desperate attempt to hold on to the fragments of his pride. That was exactly what I watched my ex-husband do in Dubai. But before I take you deeper, let me pause and remind you, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, if you want to hear the full story of betrayal, revenge, and the shocking way this chapter of my life unfolded, click subscribe now, like this video, and share it, because what you're about to hear is where the story explodes into something you never imagined. The morning after his public meltdown at the hotel counter, I went down for breakfast. The air smelled of strong coffee and fresh bread, but tension hummed across the dining hall. Guests whispered, heads turning toward him, and his young bride seated near the window. She sat stiffly, her phone in her hand, her eyes darting nervously from him to the screen. He, however, was anything but calm. He slammed his fork against his plate, his voice rising enough for half the room to hear. They cannot do this to me. My mother has no right. This is my inheritance, my legacy. I kept my head down, though inside I was trembling with a dangerous mixture of satisfaction and dread. He had no idea I was only a few tables away, listening to every word. The young bride whispered something back, her lips tight, her cheeks flushed. He waved her off dismissively, shaking his head. The cracks in their perfect facade were widening, and the audience of wealthy tourists and businessmen around them devoured every second of the drama. As I sipped my coffee, I felt a tug-of-war raging inside me. Part of me wanted to leave Dubai altogether, to escape the chaos and let his life implode without me. But another part of me, fierce, unyielding, and yes, wounded, wanted to stay, to watch, to bear witness to every collapse, every humiliation, every desperate act. Later that day, I returned to my room to find a message waiting at the desk. No sender name, just a folded sheet of paper. Meet me at the terrace bar at sunset. We need to talk. M. His mother. I clutched the paper, my pulse racing. She was here. She had come to Dubai herself, and she wanted to see me. At sunset, I walked to the terrace bar overlooking the sea. The horizon burned with streaks of gold and crimson, but my eyes scanned the tables until I saw her, dressed in understated elegance, pearls at her throat, posture straight despite the years carved into her face. She raised a hand, beckoning me over. Sit, she said softly. I obeyed, my heart heavy with questions. You saw what happened, she began, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The account is frozen. The will is clear. He cannot touch the inheritance until he proves himself capable of responsibility. That was his father's final wish, and I have upheld it. I nodded slowly. And what about the bride? She married him, thinking she was stepping into endless wealth. Her lips curved in a wry smile. She will learn the truth soon enough. Her loyalty will be tested. I doubt it will survive. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant crash of waves. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes sharp. Tell me, she said, why did you stay? Why did you come here to watch him flaunt her? Most women would have run. I swallowed hard, because I needed to see it. I needed to feel the full weight of what he had done to me. Only then could I decide who I am now. Not his wife, not his victim, just me. For the first time, her expression softened. She reached across the table, placing a hand over mine. You are stronger than he ever deserved. Do not forget that her words should have brought comfort, but instead they set off a new storm inside me. Because I knew my ex, he would not stop here. He would not let his humiliation end quietly, and I was right. That night, as the resort shimmered with lights and music, chaos erupted again. I was on the balcony of my room when I heard shouting below. I rushed to the railing and looked down. There he was, my ex-husband, storming across the pool deck, dragging his bride by the wrist. She was crying, pleading with him, but he ignored her. I will fix this, he shouted. I will show them all. They will not take what is mine. He marched into the lobby, his voice carrying up through the night air. Guests gasped, staff scrambled to intervene, but he was beyond reason. He demanded the manager, then demanded a car, then demanded an immediate audience with his lawyers. The bride broke down in tears right there in the lobby. She dropped her purse, clutched her face, and whispered through sobs, I didn't sign up for this. And that was the moment I realized his empire wasn't the only thing unraveling. His marriage, barely begun, was already cracking under the weight of his rage. The next morning, whispers turned to open gossip. People said the bride had called her parents, begging them for a ticket home. Others claimed she had confronted him in their suite, screaming loud enough for the walls to shake. By noon, I saw her myself, suitcase in hand, eyes red but determined. She strode through the lobby, past the murmuring guests, and out the glass doors without looking back. He followed moments later, wild-eyed, shouting after her, but she kept walking. She didn't stop, and just like that, his grand display, his perfect show of triumph, collapsed into public disgrace. The wife he flaunted was gone, the inheritance cut off. The audience who once admired him now sneered and whispered. I should have felt triumphant. I should have savored the justice, the revenge, the collapse of his carefully curated world. But as I stood in the shadows, watching him sink deeper into despair, another feeling settled over me. Pity. Yes, pity. Because, for all his cruelty, all his betrayal, I could see now what he truly was, a hollow man, propped up by wealth and ego, incapable of real love, real responsibility, or real happiness. That night, I received another call from his mother. It is done, she said. He has nothing left to hide behind. Whatever happens next is his own doing. I thanked her, my voice trembling, but as I set down the phone, I knew the story wasn't over. Not yet, because men like him don't accept defeat. They lash out, they find new ways to destroy, and I could feel it in my bones. He wasn't finished with me. This was no ending. This was the beginning of the most dangerous chapter yet. Asterisk. Do you know what happens when a man who has lost everything decides that someone else must be blamed? He becomes dangerous, he becomes unpredictable. And that is exactly what I faced in the days that followed his public humiliation in Dubai. But before I take you deeper into this chapter, let me pause and remind you, if you want to hear the full story, if you want to stand beside me as I walk through betrayal, revenge, and the shocking twists that left even me breathless, then subscribe to this channel now, like this video, and share it, because what you are about to hear is not just the story of a broken marriage, it is the story of survival. The morning after his young bride left him, the resort carried the air of aftermath. Guests whispered over their coffee. Staff moved quickly to erase the chaos of the night before, but the tension lingered like smoke after a fire. I sat in the corner of the dining hall, pretending to read a newspaper, but every sense was tuned to him. He sat alone at a table near the window, his once proud posture slouched, his hair disheveled. He was no longer the man who had strutted through the lobby with his new wife on his arm. He was something smaller, angrier, desperate. And then, as if drawn by instinct, his eyes found me. For a long moment, we locked gazes across the room. His lips twisted into a bitter smile. He rose, straightened his jacket, and walked toward me. You must be proud of yourself, he said, stopping at my table. His voice was low, but sharp enough to cut. You wanted to see me fall, and here I am. Are you satisfied? I folded the newspaper and met his gaze. You did this to yourself. You flaunted what you thought was yours. And now the truth is out. His jaw clenched, his hand curling into a fist at his side. You think you have won, but this is not over, not by a long shot. He turned and walked out, leaving a trail of silence in his wake. The guests who overheard leaned in, whispering furiously. I sat frozen, my heart hammering, because I knew that tone. I had lived with it for years. It was the sound of a man preparing to strike back. That afternoon, I received a message slipped under my door. No name, only words scribbled in a hurried hand. You will regret this. Tonight, I stared at the note until my hands shook. Fear coiled inside me, but beneath it burned something. I would not run, not anymore. As the sun dipped low, I decided to leave my room and blend into the crowd at the terrace bar. The air buzzed with chatter, glasses clinking, music drifting on the breeze. I wanted witnesses. I wanted people around me, but even in the crowd, I felt his eyes, watching, calculating. Sure enough, he appeared, weaving through the tables, his face set in a mask of cold fury. He stopped before me, leaning in close enough that I could smell the sharp sting of liquor on his breath. You think my mother is on your side, he hissed. You think she cares about you, but she does not. She only cares about appearances. And when I am done, you will see how quickly she turns on you. Asterisk. His words rattled me, not because I believed them, but because they carried a truth I had long avoided. His mother and I were not allies. She had frozen the inheritance. Yes, she had humiliated him. Yes, but she had not done it for me. She had done it for control. And if he was right, then I was just a piece on her chessboard. And if he was right, then I was just a piece on her chessboard. I stood, refusing to let him tower over me. Leave me alone. You have nothing left to threaten me with. He leaned back and laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Nothing left. You underestimate me. You always did. Then, he walked away, vanishing into the crowd, leaving me shaken. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the building, every sound of footsteps in the hall set my nerves on edge. I replayed his words over and over, wondering what he meant, what he planned. By morning, I had my answer. I was halfway through breakfast when two uniformed officers entered the dining hall. They walked straight to my table. Madame, one said, we need you to come with us. There has been a complaint. Confused, I rose and followed them. Guests stared, whispers swelling in my wake. My pulse raced as we stepped outside, where a police car waited. At the station, I learned the truth. He had filed a report, accusing me of harassment, of stalking him and his bride, of making threats. He claimed I had followed them to Dubai, that I had disrupted their honeymoon, that I was unstable. It was a cruel, calculated lie. I sat in the interrogation room, trembling but silent, until finally, an officer entered with a file. He set it on the table and leaned forward. "Do you have anyone who can corroborate your version of events?" he asked. I thought of his mother. She had witnessed the meltdown. She had spoken to me. She knew the truth. But could I trust her to stand by me now? Before I could answer, the door opened, and there she was, his mother. She walked in with the commanding presence of a queen entering her throne room. She placed a hand on my shoulder and turned to the officer. "This woman is telling the truth. My son is unstable. He has lost everything and he is lashing out. If you need testimony, I will provide it. If you need records, I will give them, but do not waste another moment entertaining his lies." The officer nodded, closed the file, and excused himself. When the door shut, his mother turned to me, her eyes fierce. "Do you see now? He will destroy anyone, even you, even me, to protect his pride. You must be careful." I exhaled, my chest loosening with relief, but the fear lingered, because I knew this was only the beginning of his campaign against me. He had failed to ruin me in public, so now he would try to ruin me in private, through lies and manipulation. That night, back at the resort, I sat on my balcony overlooking the sea. The waves crashed below, steady and unyielding. For the first time, I allowed myself to cry, not out of weakness, but out of exhaustion. Yet even through the tears, a new strength rose within me. He could smear my name. He could try to twist the truth, but I had faced worse, and I had survived. And this time, I was not alone. His mother, once a distant figure, now stood beside me. Together, we would hold the line. What I did not know then was that his desperation had only begun, and his next move would be more reckless, more shocking than anything he had done before. Do you know what is more dangerous than a man who has nothing? A man who believes he has nothing left to lose. That was my ex-husband, now stripped of his wealth, abandoned by his bride, and humiliated in front of the world. A cornered man becomes reckless, and I was about to discover just how far he would go. But before I take you into this next turn, let me remind you, if you want to follow every shocking twist of this story, if you want to hear how betrayal can turn into a battle for survival, make sure you subscribe, like, and share, because what comes next will leave you stunned. After the false police complaint failed, I thought perhaps he would retreat, lick his wounds, and fade into silence. I was wrong. Within days, he was back at the resort, swaggering as though nothing had happened. But I could see it in his eyes. Something had shifted. His rage had crystallized into something sharper, colder. The first sign came in whispers. Guests murmured that he had been making deals in hushed corners of the bar, slipping away late at night, speaking with men whose faces were unfamiliar, men who didn't belong among the polished tourists. At first, I dismissed it as rumor, but one evening, as I crossed the lobby, I saw it myself. He stood with two men near the entrance, their clothes too rough for the opulent setting, their voices low but urgent. When his eyes flicked up and caught mine, he smiled, not warmly, but with a predator's amusement. Later that night, a knock rattled my door. I froze, heart pounding. Slowly, I approached, pressing my ear to the wood. "Open up," a voice said. A man's voice, deep and rough, not his. Someone else. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. After a long silence, the footsteps retreated. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. "Leave Dubai. Last warning." My stomach turned cold. He was no longer just lashing out with words or lies. He was trying to scare me, drive me away, and he was using others to do it. I went to his mother. She listened silently as I showed her the note, her face unreadable. Finally, she sighed. "He is spiraling." His father always feared this. That is why the inheritance was bound with conditions. He knew his son's weakness: pride, recklessness, the hunger to dominate. Now that the money is beyond his reach, he will cling to the only power he knows: fear. Her words cut deep. I had seen this side of him in our marriage: the shouting, the slamming of doors, the cruel silences that stretched for days. But now he had no walls, no home, no reputation to restrain him. He was unleashed. That evening, she and I sat together on the terrace, watching the sun sink into the horizon. The sea glowed gold, the air thick with the scent of salt. She placed her hand over mine and said quietly, "We must be ready. He will not stop." And she was right. The next day, as I walked along the beach, I noticed a man trailing me. He pretended to look at the water, to pick up shells, but every time I stopped, he stopped. Every time I turned, he turned. I quickened my pace, heart hammering, until I reached the safety of the crowded pool deck. Only then did he disappear into the throng. Fear clawed at me. I was thousands of miles from home, trapped in a foreign city with a man who wanted me erased from his story. For the first time, I wondered if I had made a mistake by staying, if my hunger to witness his downfall had placed me directly in harm's way. That night, I barely slept. I kept the lights on, my suitcase packed by the door. At every creak, I jolted awake, expecting the worst. But morning brought something even more chilling than my imagination. In the lobby, pinned to the notice board where guests read announcements, someone had plastered copies of photographs of me, walking through the resort, eating breakfast, sitting on the terrace. Beneath each photo was the same word scrawled in black marker: stalker. Guests clustered around the board, whispering. Some glanced at me with suspicion, others with pity. My face burned as I ripped the photos down, my hands shaking. And then, across the lobby, I saw him, leaning against the bar, a glass in his hand, smirking. He had done this. He was trying to turn the entire resort against me, to isolate me, to make me look unstable. I stormed across the room, shoving the crumpled photos against his chest. This ends now, he laughed, his voice loud enough to draw even more attention. Or what? You'll cry to the management, to my mother. They all know what you are: bitter, obsessed, alone. His words were knives, cutting deeper because they echoed the insecurities I had battled in silence. But I refused to let him see me bleed. I turned and walked away, my spine straight, though inside I was trembling. That evening, his mother came to my room. She had seen the photos, heard the whispers. Her face was tight with anger. "This is beyond humiliation now," she said. "He is dangerous. He thinks he can rewrite the truth, but I will not allow it." She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a key card. "This is for a private suite on the top floor. My name is on the reservation. He will not know where you are. Stay there until we decide the next step." I thanked her, tears stinging my eyes. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of safety. But safety was an illusion. The following night, I returned late from dinner, using the back stairwell to avoid the crowded lobby. As I slid the key card into the suite door, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and there he was. His face was twisted with rage, his eyes bloodshot, his hand clutching a bottle half empty with liquor. "You think you can hide from me," he slurred. "You think you can run to my mother, play the victim, make me the villain. I will not let you win." I froze, my back pressed against the door, my heart pounding. "Go home," I said, forcing my voice steady. "Go before you do something you can't undo." He stepped closer, raising the bottle as if to strike. For a terrifying moment, I thought he would. Then, suddenly, another voice rang out. "Enough, mother." She stood at the end of the hall, her presence commanding, her eyes blazing. "Put it down," she ordered. "Right now." For a moment, he faltered. His hand shook. Then, with a growl, he hurled the bottle against the wall, where it shattered in a spray of glass and liquor. "Fine," he spat. "If you want to side with her, then you are dead to me. Both of you." He stormed past us, his footsteps echoing down the hall. I collapsed against the door, shaking, while his mother stood tall, unflinching. "He is gone for now," she said quietly. "But this is far from over. He will strike again, and next time, he may not stop at threats." Her words settled over me like a shroud, because I knew she was right. His desperation had turned into obsession. An obsession, unchecked, becomes destruction. The question that haunted me was simple. How far would he go before someone paid the ultimate price? How far would he go before someone paid the ultimate price? Before I take you deeper into this story, let me remind you, if you have not yet subscribed, please do so right now. Hit the like button, share this with someone who loves gripping stories, and make sure you never miss the next twist that could leave you gasping. I sat on the balcony of my hotel suite, overlooking the desert horizon that stretched endlessly under the golden Dubai sun. My heart was heavy, but for the first time since my divorce, I felt a strange kind of clarity. The chaos of seeing Daniel with his young bride at the resort had torn me apart in earlier scenes. But now, something inside me was shifting. My pain was still sharp, but it had started to transform into a fire I had not felt in years. Daniel believed he had stripped me of everything: dignity, security, love, but I still had one thing he underestimated: the truth. And that truth was not just about him, it was about his mother, Patricia, the elegant woman who had remained quiet through all of this. Her silence heavier than words. Patricia had always been a woman of grace and sharp intelligence. She commanded respect in any room she entered, not through loud declarations but through the weight of her presence. Yet, she had remained on the sidelines, watching her son flaunt his young bride in Dubai, letting me endure the humiliation of whispers, stolen glances, and cruel laughter. That night, as the resort lit up with lanterns and laughter carried over the warm breeze, Patricia finally called me into her private suite. I walked in, uncertain of her intentions, and found her sitting near the window with a glass of wine, her silver hair glowing in the dim light. "I knew this day would come," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon, "and I have been preparing for it in my own way." Her words cut through me. "Preparing for what?" I asked, my voice trembling with both fear and curiosity. For the moment when Daniel's choices would destroy him, for the moment when his arrogance would blind him so completely that the only thing left to bring him down would be the truth he has hidden from everyone, including that young girl he parades as his bride. I froze. A chill ran through me. "What truth?" Patricia turned to me then, her gaze piercing, her voice calm but filled with something deeper, regret, maybe even sorrow. "Daniel has always been reckless. You know that better than anyone. But he has done something he cannot erase. Something that will not just ruin his reputation, but also his fragile little marriage." My breath caught. "Tell me." Patricia leaned forward, her hands gripping the armrest of her chair. "His bride believes she is stepping into a fairy tale. She believes she has captured the heart of a man who will provide her with the life of her dreams. But Daniel is not as free as he pretends to be. He has entangled himself in debts, lies, and obligations that she knows nothing about. And worse, he has hidden from her the fact that he made promises to men who will not forgive his betrayal." I stared at her, unable to speak. This was more than gossip. This was dangerous. That Patricia lowered her voice. "I have remained silent all this time because I hoped he would come to his senses. I hoped he would remember the values I raised him with. But he has pushed too far. He flaunted that girl in front of you, knowing the pain it would cause. He disrespected the years you gave him. And for that, I can no longer remain silent. One phone call, and everything he has built on lies will crumble. One phone call, and his young bride will see him for who he truly is." My heart pounded. It was happening. The silence that had haunted me for weeks was finally breaking. Patricia was not just a bystander. She was the key. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Because, my dear, he has humiliated you enough, and because you deserve to see that justice does not always come from anger or revenge. Sometimes it comes from truth being revealed at the right moment." Her words filled the room with a gravity I could not escape. I realized then that Patricia had been waiting for me to break, waiting to see if I would crumble or rise. And now that I had endured, she was ready to act. The next evening, as the resort prepared for yet another lavish dinner hosted by Daniel and his new bride, Patricia slipped away quietly. I followed her, unable to contain my curiosity. She entered a private lounge, picked up the phone, and dialed a number from memory. Her voice was calm but sharp as she spoke. "It is time. He has gone too far. You know what to do." The silence on the other end was short but heavy, and when she ended the call, she turned to me with a look that sent shivers down my spine. "It is done," she said simply. That night, the air around the resort shifted. Daniel strutted into the dining hall with his bride, their laughter ringing like shallow bells. Guests clapped, music played, and for a moment he looked untouchable. But, as the evening wore on, a tension began to creep into the atmosphere. Guests whispered, glances turned sharp, and the once joyful celebration became a stage for something darker. A man in a tailored suit approached, Daniel at the center of the room, his expression grim. He handed him an envelope, his voice low but audible to those nearby. "You have been exposed." Daniel's face drained of color as he tore the envelope open. His bride peered over his shoulder, her eyes widening with every line she read. I watched from across the room as her smile faltered, her hand slipping away from his. The crowd began to murmur. Patricia stood near the entrance, her glass of wine in hand, her expression unreadable. "What is this?" his bride demanded, her voice breaking through the noise. "Is it true?" Daniel stammered, tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. "You lied to me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You made me believe you were someone else. You dragged me into this nightmare." The room erupted. Guests whispered, cameras flashed, and in that single moment, Daniel's empire of arrogance collapsed. His young bride turned her back on him, walking out of the hall as the crowd parted for her. Patricia finally spoke, her voice firm and unwavering. "I warned you, Daniel. You cannot build happiness on lies. Tonight, you pay the price." The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the weight of judgment. betrayal, and the inevitable fall of a man who believed he was untouchable. I stood there, trembling, as I realized Patricia had not only broken her silence, she had saved me from drowning in shame. She had chosen truth over loyalty to her own son, and in doing so, she had given me the one thing I thought I had lost forever: vindication. Before I begin, remember to subscribe, like, and share this story so you never miss the next shocking twist. Your support keeps these stories alive and ensures we can keep bringing you powerful narratives that cut deep into the heart. The resort, which had glowed with lights and laughter only hours before, now felt suffocated with whispers and judgment. The grand hall, once filled with champagne toasts and music, had become the stage for Daniel's collapse. His young bride Isla had stormed out after the envelope revealed the truths he thought he had buried forever. I remained in the corner, hidden among the murmuring guests, my heart beating like a drum. Patricia stood firm near the entrance, her calm defiance radiating through the chaos. Daniel, for once in his life, looked small. His confident smirk had disappeared, replaced by the hollow panic of a man stripped bare. The guests did not leave. They lingered like vultures circling a wounded animal. Phones were out, cameras flashing, recording his downfall for the world to see. Daniel's empire of pride had collapsed in a single evening, and the witnesses would not forget it. I slipped away quietly, needing air. The desert night wrapped around me as I stepped out to the terrace. The warm wind brushed against my face, carrying with it the weight of everything that had just unfolded. And then I heard the sound of muffled sobs. There, leaning against the railing, was Isla. Her once perfect makeup was streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she tried to steady herself. She turned when she sensed my presence, her eyes swollen but blazing with questions. "Did you know?" she demanded, her voice sharp with betrayal. I hesitated. How could I explain the years of lies, the betrayals, the slow unraveling of the man she thought she married? I took a step closer, my voice steady but soft. "I knew parts, not everything, but I knew enough to see the man you see tonight is not who you thought he was." She shook her head, choking back another sob. "He promised me everything. He told me he was free, successful, ready to build a future with me. He said I was his escape, his chance to start over, but it was all a lie." Her words carried the same sting I had felt years ago. When Daniel's first betrayals had shattered my trust, I recognized the pain in her voice, the disbelief that someone you love could betray you so completely. "I understand," I whispered, "more than you think." Isla's eyes narrowed. "Understand? You were his wife. You lived with him. Did you know he was drowning in debt? Did you know he had promised things to people who would never forgive him?" I drew a long breath. I knew he was reckless. I knew he lied when it suited him. I knew he loved the image of power more than the reality of responsibility. But I did not know the extent until tonight. Patricia made sure the truth came out. At the mention of Patricia's name, Ila's gaze softened slightly. His mother. She knew. She destroyed him tonight. She did what needed to be done, I replied, because he would have destroyed himself and everyone around him if she had not acted. Isla leaned against the railing, her shoulders shaking. "I left everything behind for him, my family, my career, my life. I believed him when he said I was all he needed, and now I see it was never about me. It was about control, about appearances." Her pain was raw, and for the first time, I felt a strange kinship with her. She was not my enemy, not truly. She was another victim of Daniel's charm and deceit. "I know what you are feeling," I said gently. "The betrayal, the humiliation, the anger. But listen to me, you are not ruined. You are not broken. What he did reflects on him, not on you." She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "How did you survive it? How did you stand up after everything he did to you?" The question hit me hard. I thought of the nights I cried myself to sleep, the mornings I forced myself out of bed, the moments I nearly gave up. I survived because I chose to, because I refused to let him define me. You have that same choice now. Isla wiped her tears, her breathing heavy. "Do you think people will ever forget this? Do you think I will ever be able to live without this shame?" I stepped closer, my voice unwavering. "Yes, they will forget, but you will not. And that is not a curse, it is a strength. You will remember what he did to you, and it will make you stronger, sharper, wiser. You will not be fooled again. And one day, you will look back at tonight and see it not as your downfall, but as your awakening." Her lips trembled as she absorbed my words. Slowly, she nodded, as if a seed of resilience had been planted. Behind us, the sound of raised voices echoed through the hall. Daniel was unraveling, his pride tearing at the seams. Guests were questioning him, pressing him for answers, while Patricia remained silent, her eyes fixed on her son with the disappointment only a mother could carry. Isla turned toward the noise, her expression hardening. I am going back in. I want him to see me walk away from him in front of everyone. I want him to know he cannot break me. I followed her as she marched back into the hall, her tears wiped away, her head held high. The crowd parted as she entered, their whispers rising. Daniel spotted her instantly, desperation flashing in his eyes. Isla, please, he pleaded, reaching for her hand. You cannot believe this. It is lies. I can explain. She stopped him with a raised hand, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. No more lies, no more explanations. You humiliated me, you tricked me, and you dragged me into your mess. I will not stand by you. The room went silent. All eyes were on her as she continued. I walked into this marriage believing you were a man of honor. Tonight, I see you for what you are, and I refuse to live in the shadow of your deceit. Her words hung in the air like a sentence passed by a judge. Daniel's face twisted with anger and panic. He reached for her again, but she pulled away, her eyes locked on his. I am done, Daniel, she said firmly, and when I walk out of this room, I will never look back. Gasps filled the room as she turned and walked away, her steps steady, her head unbowed. The crowd erupted in whispers, cameras flashing as she pushed open the doors and disappeared into the night. Daniel stood frozen, his hands still outstretched, his empire crumbling not just in wealth and lies, but in love. His young bride, the jewel he flaunted, had abandoned him in front of the very people he sought to impress. Patricia finally spoke, her voice cold and clear. This is the price of your arrogance. You believed you could build happiness on deceit, but truth always finds its way to the surface. Tonight, you have lost everything that mattered. Daniel turned to her, his face twisted with rage. You did this. You destroyed me. Patricia did not flinch. No, Daniel. You destroyed yourself. I simply refused to cover for you any longer. The guests, sensing the end of the spectacle, began to leave, their whispers trailing behind them. The hall emptied, leaving Daniel standing alone in the ruins of his pride. I lingered near the doorway, my heart heavy but strangely at peace. Isla had walked away stronger, Patricia had stood firm, and Daniel had finally faced the reckoning he had long evaded. As I stepped outside into the night, I realized this was not just his downfall, it was my liberation. The chains of his betrayal no longer bound me. For the first time in years, I felt free. Before diving into this chapter of the story, make sure you subscribe, like, and share. These stories are built to take you on a journey of emotion, suspense, and truth. Stay connected so you never miss the next shocking twist. The night in Dubai had turned heavy with tension. The lights of the resort still glowed, but the sparkle they carried earlier now felt tainted. The music had died, the laughter had vanished, and all that remained was the echo of humiliation. Daniel stood broken inside the grand hall, abandoned by his bride, exposed before his guests, and left with nothing but the ashes of his pride. I stepped out into the courtyard, trying to steady my own breath. The desert wind carried with it the scent of jasmine and sand, a strange reminder that beauty still existed even when life felt drenched in betrayal. Patricia followed behind me, her presence as calm as the moonlight. She did not rush to speak, but when she did, her words cut sharp. It is not over, she said quietly. This is only the beginning. I turned to her, confusion tightening my chest. What do you mean? His bride left him, his lies have been exposed. What more could there be? Patricia's eyes narrowed, her voice carrying the weight of years of foresight. Daniel has never accepted loss. He will not walk away quietly. Desperation is a dangerous companion, and my son is desperate now. That is when he becomes most reckless. Her warning sent a chill through me. I wanted to believe Daniel's downfall was complete, that justice had been delivered, but Patricia's words lingered like an omen. The next morning, the resort hummed with gossip. Guests whispered in the hallways, staff exchanged glances, and every corner carried the weight of scandal. Isla had left the premises under the cover of night, her luggage quietly loaded into a car. Her absence was louder than her presence. Everyone knew the young bride was gone, and with her departure, Daniel's facade had shattered completely. But Daniel did not retreat. He appeared at breakfast in the main dining area, his face pale but his voice forced into charm. He smiled too wide, laughed too loudly, and tried to carry on as though nothing had happened. Yet every eye in the room was on him, every whisper a reminder that the mask had slipped. I sat across the hall, watching him from a distance. The performance was painful to witness. He reached for control, but control had slipped through his fingers. Guests avoided his table. Conversations hushed when he entered the room, and even the staff moved around him with caution. Patricia arrived late, her posture straight, her expression unyielding. She did not greet him, did not acknowledge him. Her silence was louder than any accusation. Daniel's mask cracked then. He slammed his cup onto the table, the porcelain shattering against the wood. Gasps rose from the diners, but he did not care. His eyes burned with fury as he stormed out, his footsteps echoing like a warning. I knew then what Patricia meant. He was desperate, and desperation would drive him to the edge. That evening, I received a message slipped under my door. The handwriting was unmistakably his. Meet me at the edge of the resort cliffs. Midnight, come alone. My hands trembled as I read the note. I wanted to tear it apart, to ignore it, but something in the ink spoke louder than fear. He wanted to confront me, and if I did not go, I would always wonder what venom he intended to spill. Patricia knocked on my door soon after, her eyes sharp. She had heard. You cannot go, she warned. Not alone. He is unstable. His pride is gone, and men like him lash out when cornered. But something in me knew I had to face him. I had carried the weight of his betrayal for too long. If this was the night he wanted confrontation, then I was ready. I need to hear what he has to say, I whispered. And I need him to hear me. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded slowly. Then I will follow from a distance. He cannot be trusted. The desert was quiet at midnight. The stars burned bright overhead, their cold light illuminating the cliffs that overlooked the endless sands. I walked carefully, my footsteps crunching against the gravel path. The sound of the waves crashing against the faraway rocks blended with the whisper of the wind. Daniel stood at the edge, his silhouette sharp against the night sky. His suit jacket hung loose, his tie undone, his posture trembling with anger and exhaustion. You came, he said, his voice hoarse. I did, I replied, keeping my tone steady. What do you want, Daniel? He turned sharply, his eyes wild. I want to know why. Why you and my mother decided to destroy me. Why you could not let me live my life the way I wanted. I clenched my fists, holding back the fury rising within me. Destroy you, Daniel. You destroyed yourself. You chose lies, betrayal, and arrogance. You humiliated me, discarded me, and then paraded your young bride like a trophy. And now you stand here blaming me. His laugh was hollow, broken. I gave you everything. A home, a life, a name. And what did you give me? Criticism, disappointment, demands. You never understood me. Understood you. I snapped. I gave you years of my life. Loyalty, love, and trust. And you repaid me with betrayal. You never wanted to be understood, Daniel. You wanted to be worshipped. The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened. He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. You think you have won. You think exposing me makes you stronger. But without me, you are nothing. I held my ground. No, Daniel. Without you, I am finally free. And you cannot stand that. He raised his hand as though to strike me, his anger boiling over. But before he could move further, Patricia's voice rang out from the shadows. Enough. Daniel froze. His mother stepped into the moonlight, her presence as commanding as ever. She looked at him with a mixture of sorrow and steel. This ends tonight, she said firmly. You will not harm her. You will not harm anyone. You have burned every bridge, Daniel, and now you will face the consequences. His voice cracked with rage. You chose her over me, your own son. Patricia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I chose the truth over lies. I chose dignity over disgrace. And yes, I chose her, because she stood by you with loyalty while you tore her apart. You do not deserve her forgiveness, and you will not get mine either. Daniel staggered back, his chest heaving. The cliffs loomed behind him, the drop steep and unforgiving. For a moment, I feared he might take a step too far, whether by choice or by accident. But he steadied himself, his rage turning cold. You will regret this, he spat. Both of you. Then he turned and walked away, his figure swallowed by the darkness. Patricia exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging under the weight of what had just unfolded. I rushed to her side, my heart pounding. He will not stop, I whispered. No, she agreed, but neither will we. We stood together at the edge of the cliffs, the night wrapping around us like a vow. For the first time in years, I did not feel alone. The battle was not finished, but the tide had turned. Daniel's desperation had revealed the truth. He was no longer the man in control. We were. Before I take you into this last scene, remember to subscribe, like, and share. This is the moment where everything comes full circle, where lies collapse and truth claims its victory. Do not miss what happens next. The morning after the confrontation at the cliffs, the resort awoke in uneasy silence. Guests whispered about the drama of the night before, their curiosity insatiable. The story of Daniel's humiliation had spread beyond the walls of the hotel, reaching local papers and travel blogs. His name was now a headline, not for success or charm, but for scandal. I sipped my coffee on the balcony, watching the desert sun rise, its golden rays cutting through the haze. For the first time in years, I felt clarity. Daniel no longer had control over me, over Patricia, or over the narrative he had built with lies. He was exposed, and nothing could change that. But Patricia's warning echoed in my mind. Desperation is dangerous. And Daniel was nothing if not desperate. I knew the storm was not over. By mid-afternoon, the storm arrived. Daniel barged into the lobby of the resort, his suit disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking. He demanded attention, shouting at staff, slamming his fists against the counter. The guests gathered at a distance, watching as the once confident man unraveled before their eyes. You think you can humiliate me? He roared. You think you can take everything I built, this resort, these people, this life, it is mine, and none of you can take it away. The manager tried to calm him, but Daniel shoved him aside, his rage uncontainable. Cameras were raised, phones recorded every outburst. His downfall was no longer private, it was public, viral, irreversible. Patricia appeared then, walking into the lobby with quiet grace. Her presence silenced the room. Daniel froze at the sight of her, his chest heaving, his face twisted with a mix of rage and fear. Mother, he spat. You did this. You poisoned them against me. You always wanted me to fail. Patricia did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her words carried the weight of finality. No, Daniel, you poisoned yourself. I only refused to hide it for you any longer. His hands trembled. His eyes darted wildly. He turned to me next, his fury sharper. And you are nothing without me. You will regret standing against me. I stepped forward, my voice steady, though my heart raced. I regretted being with you long before this. What I will never regret is finally breaking free from your lies. The room gasped. His mask slipped further. He lunged toward me, but before he could reach, Patricia raised her hand. Stop, she commanded, her voice like steel. He froze, his body trembling, his chest heaving. The silence stretched, every eye locked on the fractured man in front of them. And then Patricia spoke the words that ended it all. You no longer carry my name, nor my protection. From this moment, you are cut off. Every account, every connection, every privilege you ever enjoyed because of this family is gone. One call, Daniel, and the world will know you are nothing more than a fraud sustained by lies. That call has already been made. Daniel staggered back as though struck. You would not. Patricia's gaze did not waver. I already have. The color drained from his face. He knew her power was real. Without her backing, every deal he had, every partner he fooled, every false promise he leaned on would crumble. The empire he flaunted had been built on the foundation of her name, and now that name was stripped away. He turned wildly, looking for allies, but found none. The guests avoided his gaze, the staff stood still, and even the walls seemed to close in around him. His young bride was gone. His mother had disowned him. His former wife stood stronger than ever. The man who once believed himself untouchable was utterly alone. He collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, there was no performance, no arrogance, only the hollow sobs of a man who had lost everything. Patricia did not approach him. She turned to me instead, her voice soft but resolute. It is done. And she walked away, her posture straight, her dignity intact. The crowd parted for her, their respect evident. I lingered a moment longer, watching Daniel crumble. A part of me wanted to feel pity, but I could not. Too many scars, too many lies, too many nights of pain. This was the consequence he had earned. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat with Patricia on the terrace. The desert wind was cool, the stars beginning to pierce the sky. For the first time in years, I felt something like peace. You were brave, Patricia said softly, stronger than I ever imagined. I shook my head. I was broken, but you gave me the chance to rise again. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. No, you gave yourself that chance. I only helped you see it. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything that had happened settling around us. And then she spoke again, her voice carrying a quiet strength. Daniel will have to face the world he created, but you are free now. What will you do with that freedom? I looked out at the horizon, the endless expanse of desert glowing under the twilight. For the first time in years, the answer felt clear. I will live, I will rebuild, and I will never let anyone cage me again. Patricia reached for my hand, and I took it. Together, we watched the stars bloom in the sky, knowing that the chapter of betrayal had closed, and a new one of strength had begun. But just as I thought the night would end in quiet, a final shock came. A staff member approached with a note. It was addressed to Patricia. She opened it slowly, her face tightening as she read. She handed it to me, her voice low. He is gone. The note was brief, written in Daniel's hand. You took everything. Now watch me disappear. The air grew heavy. The resort buzzed with whispers again. Some believed he had fled the country. Others feared he had done something darker. But no one knew for sure. Patricia closed her eyes, her hand gripping mine tighter. Wherever he is, his fate is no longer ours to carry. And with those words, the story ended, not with neat resolution, but with the haunting weight of uncertainty. His downfall was complete, yet his shadow lingered, a reminder that the consequences of lies never vanish completely. As I looked out into the desert night, I felt the strange truth settle in my chest. Freedom was never the absence of pain. It was the strength to move forward despite it, and that strength was finally mine. Forward despite it, and that strength was finally mine.